As we begin this celebration and this remembrance, it seems appropriate that we would say a prayer. If you will, bow your heads. Father God, we give thanks that we are not alone in our time of grief and hurt. So while we're in this room remembering this wonderful person that we loved, we ask for a portion of your grace and your strength that's sufficient to help us do just that. We thank you for her life. We grieve at her premature death, but we trust you for her destiny. We ask this in the name of the one who said he was the resurrection and the life, and amen.
So Mike asked if we would come up and just have everybody here in the audience share a little bit, share some stories, memories of Teresa, and I agreed to start us off here. I'm the head coach of the GMC mountain bike team here in Milledgeville. I started our original youth mountain bike team, the Old Capitol Racing, back in 2015, and Teresa brought Adam out to ride with us on his little bitty bike. Can't look at him now and think he was riding something so small. But you know, that first season, Teresa came out and she stayed in the car. She brought Adam to every single practice, but she stayed in the car. She read books. Getting near the end of the season, she came up to me and says, "Man, this is boring. I really don't like just sitting around in the car. Could I help?" I'm like, twist my arm. Absolutely. We need coaches. Had a couple of young ladies on the team. They really needed a female coach. The next year she came out and she became the team mom. You know, she was there to encourage. She went from having 2 kids to having about 50 kids. I've talked to a lot of the teammates and heard the stories of, you know, them struggling and Teresa encouraging them. That's what she did. You know, she was never one to really want to step into the limelight. In 2019, I guess it was, I started the GMC team, and we wanted to have a school-based team. We had enough kids, and I went to Teresa and said, "Hey, Teresa, I need a favor. Can you be the head coach for the Old Cap?" And she was like, "I don't know if I can do that." And she didn't really like to get up and talk in front of people. But being the person that she is, she said, "If you need me, I'll do it." And she stepped in. I think everybody that came through that program will agree she was a wonderful head coach. It didn't matter what we asked of her. She stepped up. She did it. And the impact that she's made on so many kids' lives will live on. I know I'm personally grateful for everything she did. I look back and as I'm trying to piece things together for what we're going to do next, there's a lot of holes there. But the influence that she had with the existing coaches, the other parents, has had them, a lot of them step up and come to me and go, "What can I do? What can I do to help?" So I'm going to miss her. But I've got so many wonderful, wonderful memories and joy. And every time I look back at the pictures of all these kids and I look at the ones who are going on to school and getting scholarships, whether it be in athletics or academics, because of the lessons that we taught them, that's, to me, making all the difference in the world. Jason, you want to come up?
So I met Teresa in 2017. We both started our beginning mountain biking experiences at about the same time, and we would see each other at races, and we would line up and we would start, and Teresa and I would usually be about the same pace, and so we would ride together. And then later that year, because when you start cycling, you never know exactly where it goes, and for us, it meant buying Chainbuster Racing, and shortly thereafter, Teresa became a racer on our race team and just a stable fixture in the race community. And one of the things that, to a person, everybody always said about Teresa is that she always carried joy. She always had a smile. And it would be very easy, because of her demeanor, to underestimate her, and lots of people did. And they did it to their peril. Ecclesiastes 9:10 says, "Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your might." And I can't think of a verse that would sum up Teresa more than that. From early in life, when she was going through high school with cross-country running and going to college cross-country running, being an accomplished pianist, to being a homeschool teacher. It's amazing to me that there are entire school systems in the state of Georgia who will produce hundreds of graduates in a graduation year. Teresa's school put out, and in that, none of them would qualify to go to Georgia Tech. And Teresa built a school that put out 2 graduates, and both of them were accepted and go to Georgia Tech. Pretty good average. From scouting, being a scouting mom, to cycling, to painting, and probably hundreds of things that I don't even know about. When Teresa decided that her hand found something to do, she did it with all of her might. But even then, Philippians 3:7 says, "Of all the things I have accomplished that I once thought were valuable, I now consider them all worthless in comparison to knowing what Jesus Christ has done. Everything else is worthless when compared to the infinite value of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord." So that's, as a picture, a young Levi who's here painted, and this was shortly after Teresa passed, and in his mind, that is Teresa pedaling in heaven. And he painted that on Wednesday. So her cycling environment may look a little different. Everything else may look a little different as for Teresa now, but her impact lives forever. Her impact on your life, her impact on mine. Because whatever Teresa found to do, even if it was making an impact, she did it with a smile. She did it with grace. She did it with joy. And it didn't matter at all how hard whatever it was. She pursued it with gratefulness and joy. Others have written in things to share, and we have Tammy Chastain, who has some emails and some things that people have shared. And so Tammy is going to come up, and she's going to read, and we're going to open, when Tammy gets done, for some of you, if you would like to come up and share your joyous memories of your experiences with Teresa. We're going to give you that opportunity, and then Tom and I will keep things moving, and Tammy has lots of material. So, Tammy?
This is a letter from a childhood friend of Teresa's. Her name is Dutchie Hanna, and she lives in the Netherlands. It was August 1983 when I arrived as an exchange student in Palmetto. The main goal was high school while living with the host family, the Deans, and experiencing the American way of life. High school with the American language, classes, and sports were different than I was used to, and it took me a while to get my footing. and there was Teresa. She took me under her wing, and I stayed there. From the start, there was this magic click that never left. My first and best friend in the States, Teresa showed me around school, classes, hidden places, and the world of high school sport. The both of us participated in the volleyball team. With the school bus and the whole team to different schools in different counties, we had a great time and our friendship became closer. Teresa invited me to her home on Ono Road. I went through my scrapbook this weekend in preparation of this talk. I found a map drawing made by Teresa so I would know how to get to her place. She was the first American friend I visited for the first time alone, and it was scary. Her name and phone number with the address above. That's how she did things for me, consciously explaining the American whys and making sure I got it. With this map, she made sure I found Ono Road and the crisp home. That was one of my many visits. Even after my exchange year, the crisp home was always open for this duchy and to extend my friendship. Christmas parties with a whole bunch of girls at the crisps, laughing and having a great time. Teresa invited me to her life as she knew it and showed me how things were done in 1983. Thanks to her, I got to ride the band bus during the state game when the Palmetto Raiders won. I experienced the world of high school band and football, and with a constant Teresa tutorial explaining every question I had about this phenomenon. I remember Teresa being amazed that I was able to eat my chicken leg or breast with a knife and fork. One way or another, she just had to learn this too. So I made the deal. I teach you how to eat chicken, and you teach me how to blow bubble gum with your mouth. It did not take long before we went out to eat in a restaurant and ate chicken with a knife and fork. And the bubble gum, I excel in it, thanks to Teresa. Mom wasn't too happy when I came home bubbling away. Teresa introduced me to running. Years of soccer never got me into running shoes, but TC did. No street in Palmetto we missed when school was done. We started in the middle of winter, in the cold rain, up and down the hills, or even the bush by the Atlanta Noonan Road, I remember. She had a funny way of keeping me up to her pace, which was high. Keep going, Hannah. I need to let you win sometimes too. Like I would ever. But my love for running was born, and during our chats on Facebook or in our mails, I kept her up to date about my times and distances. The occasional picture of my sweaty, red-hot face is the evidence. Her pride, love, and joy with her husband Mike and children Natalie and Adam, the biking love she found and in which she was doing such a great job, living in Milledgeville and her PT job, me living the police detective life in Holland and getting married to Lawrence and having the girls. Even though years went by that we didn't physically see each other, she opened her house and family in Milledgeville when Lawrence and I came for a reunion visit in 2010. Talks about life, telling me how she sees the world and how things are, giving me another spectrum of things, telling me the way only she could, thoughtful, honest, and with some jokes now and then. There are lots and lots of memories to share. Graduation, all the bus rides together to games, swimming at Lake Lanier, and the way we all rolled many yards with toilet paper. With a glowing face and eyes full of mischief, she explained to me that it was a must in America to get your yard rolled. She never told me that when they rolled my yard, I was the one responsible for cleaning it up. Teresa was always the one who never forgot to pick me up and let me share every possible experience there was. And now she has ridden her last bike training. Teresa will always be in my mind and my head. She will always be a major part of that special year I had in Palmetto. She helped me through it and live it. Thinking about the USA, Georgia, Teresa will always be part of me, and her kindness will stay in my heart. This is from one of her student athletes from the Old Capitol team. Her name is Maddie Souls. One of my all-time favorite races was the 2015 Red Clay Ramble. We were all relatively new at racing, especially a gravel race. Teresa helped Adam gear up as Stella and I did. We sat at the start line waiting to see what a gravel race had in store for us. Teresa did what she did best and volunteered to help run the race and host a rest stop. You knew it was going to be a good rest stop if she was sitting there cheering you on. She always had a way with giving encouraging words and giving you the motivation to finish the race. That was an outstanding theme throughout the years that I had her as a coach, and it is something that I will always remember. She was always easy to learn from, but also always knew how to push you to be your best.
One of the stories that doesn't belong to me, it belongs to Derek. So Derek, I'm going to tell your story. This is one that happened this year, and Derek and Teresa would do lots of gravel training rides together. And if you don't know Derek, you should get to know Derek. But there could not be two more polar opposite people. So they were on their way to ride in the North Georgia mountains on a Southern Cross route. It was Derek's first real gravel experience. And it had been raining, and it was cold, and it had all the makings of a disaster. So for the entire ride up there, Derek decided to concentrate on all the makings of the disaster. It's wet, it's cold, it's going to be miserable, At some point, Teresa had had enough. And she simply looked over at Derek and she said, "It's just gravel." So that became a thing. So now when something gets hard, when conditions aren't exactly preferable, since that time, Derek has looked and he has just said, "It is just gravel."
This is from Teresa's art teacher, Dana Wiggins Thompson. It is with a very heavy heart that I have to say goodbye to my oldest student and friend, Teresa Crisp Rose. Teresa, you are a wonderful mother, artist, and cyclist. I loved watching you grow as a watercolor artist and loved hearing your cycling news and your talking about your beautiful family. My deepest condolences to Mike, Natalie, and Adam, and to her sweet mama and daddy. Teresa, I'm so sorry that you won't make the cycling race in Italy, but I know that you are flying high and cycling in heaven. You will be sorely missed and never forgotten. This is from Lori Ann Mickle-Milam. Teresa Crisp Rose was one of my first friends when I arrived in Milledgeville. I took on leading the local homeschool group, and she stayed by my side as I learned the new families in the area. We did near about everything together for years. She taught me how to make buckeyes and many other sweets during our many visits together. That girl loved her sweets. Our kids played together, went on field trips together, and we spent many mom nights out with our amazing mom group. Our families spent some time together, boating and enjoying some meals. I knew her parents as Mama and Papa Crisp, and she would fill me in on their lives and her brother Steve. We encouraged one another and supported one another again and again. Through the years, we discussed curriculum, homeschool methods, discipline, God, churches, recipes, teas, health, physical therapy, piano, photography, art, gardening, jewelry, and biking. We cried, laughed, and prayed together. When she stepped into the lead role of our homeschool group, I assisted her as she did me for several years. As our kids got into high school, our lives took different paths, but we would meet for tea, catch up, and talk about all the new things our families were doing. Recently, I started physical therapy at Twin Lakes, and I loved seeing her there, catching up and getting regular hugs. One of our last conversations was about Natalie graduating and Adam finishing his first year at Georgia Tech. I loved following Teresa's posts, her travels, her amazing artistry, her crazy biking skills, and her family that she loved so much. I told her these things many times, and now I am telling you. She was a true friend, and I loved her. There are not enough words to express the sadness of her passing. There are not enough tears to express the void that her life will leave for so many. She lived well and loved well, and so we, her friends and family, must continue on in her footsteps, to live well and love well, to step out and try new things, to be kind, forgiving, to laugh, and to remember all the many things we have to be thankful for. Don't take life or your family and friends for granted. We do not know when our last day will be.
Jim?
I met Teresa 2 years ago. She showed up at our club ride. She was on a borrowed bike and some saggy mountain bike clothes. And I said to her, I said, don't worry, this is a no-drop ride. And for you that aren't into cycling, that means we'll wait for you. You know, don't worry. If you fall behind, we'll wait for you. We'll help you. Boy, was that a mistake. She proceeded to pound us all into the pavement. I want, especially our kids, to know, your mom was not only a 1%er, she was a 1/10 of 1%er. I've known world champions, national record holders. Your mother was as strong as any cyclist I've ever known. And on her very last club ride with us, we give away these socks. We have these challenges, and they have the Strava crown on the back of them, the KOM socks. And you can't buy them. You have to earn them. So you have to have the top time ever on a segment. Teresa would not only break the women's segment record, she beats the men's segment record. Elite men, collegiate men. That's who your mom was. She was a champion, one of the finest individuals I've ever met, not only as a cyclist and an athlete, but like so many have said, the joy your mom had. She always had a smile. And I think it was an extra little smile when she was grinding us and knew we were hurting so bad on those rides. So anyways, ride in peace, Teresa. We love you.
This is from
I hope I can get through this. Like many of you, I was devastated when I heard the news of the accident with Teresa. But we've known, I was talking to Mike, I guess, we've known Mike and Teresa, I guess, since 1998. Somewhere around 1998, we went to church together. They moved to Milledgeville. And anyway, a few years later, we started the church, and Teresa and Mike came on board, and you know, and then in 2000, I guess, end of 2014, we actually sold our church, and Mike and Teresa, you know, we kept in touch, but we were, you know, weren't going to church together. And so, but like many of you, I continue to follow Teresa on Facebook, and man, were her posts, I mean, if you love to read her post on Facebook. And of course, my wife and I, we had bought some bicycles, and from time to time I would, and of course we didn't ride mountain bike trails, but I would, you know, text Teresa or post on Facebook, we were going somewhere, and she, oh, I've been on these trails, you need to go on these trails, and so she would give me, you know, some advice and all. But, you know, when she passed away, and, you know, the first thing that came to my mind, obviously, was cycling. And, but I began to think back and reflect a little bit on Teresa. And she was a wonderful organist at our church. And I think of the mornings that she came early in the morning. I'm talking about 7:30 in the morning to come and practice and, be there and just, what do you need me to do? What do you need me to do? How y'all want this, how you want this done? And she just gave that 100%. And then, was following her on Facebook. I found out she's taking art lessons, okay? And so, started looking at some of this art she started doing, and then it started getting better and better and better. And I looked at this art, and I said, she doesn't need art lessons. She could be teaching art lessons. I mean, if you've seen some of the art that she did, we saw it at the Georgia National Fair. It was unreal. It's just so talented with the art that she, the drawings that she did. And then, as y'all have said before, with just the job and, with Natalie and Adam and with the homeschooling and then Adam through his Eagle Scouts and the time and effort that, that she put in. She was invested in her kids. In fact, as I thought about Teresa, there was not one thing that she was not invested in 150%. I don't care what she did, it was 150% effort. And, it's just, but we're all devastated by her passing. I mean, it's devastating. But we know where she is today. And she's riding on streets of gold today. She's riding in scenery we've never seen before. And so I thank God for knowing her. She's had an impact on my life and my wife's life and many of y'all. And we're going to miss her. And Mike and family, if you need anything, we're going to be there for you, okay?
This is a note from Susan May. She won at everything she attempted: biking, painting, track, parenting, and living. She was a valued member of our little tribe of lady mountain bikers. 2 Christmases ago, she came up with the idea of a mountain bike scavenger hunt to exchange Christmas gifts. She asked me to show up at Bartram Forest to help her tie some numbered ribbons on trees scattered throughout the trails. The ribbons were beautifully arranged in that artistic Teresa style, with different colors and textures that would help us find them during our ride. Each of us brought a gift. I think $15 was the set limit, but it had to be able to be carried on our bikes in a camelback or a backpack. We each drew a number that would correspond to the gift we brought, and then drew numbers for the gift we would receive. We ventured out on the trail, and when someone spotted a ribbon, we would check the number on it, and whoever had that number on their gift would present it to the person who drew that number to be the recipient. It was such a fun activity, full of smiles, giggles, and excitement as we rode from ribbon to ribbon. When we got finished, we had some refreshments in the parking lot, exchanged our happy Christmas wishes, and went our separate ways. Later, she gave each of us a hand-painted Christmas card scene. This past Christmas, we had a party at my house and played Christmas movie bingo. Of course, Teresa won. However, the prize was a motion-activated yodeling pickle Christmas ornament. She later told me that she couldn't wait for someone to walk by the tree to hear it yodeling from the branches. She then admitting to just waving her hand to make it sing so she could laugh.
I'm sure that Mike and Adam and Natalie and the rest of her family Could say otherwise, but I only saw Teresa rattled one time. It was not a common occurrence, and it was earlier this spring. She had traveled all the way up to Tennessee to compete in what was one of her more difficult races. Teresa had gotten to the point where she didn't like anything easy, so they were all pretty difficult. But on this one, it was a 65-mile mountain bike race through some pretty steep elevation, pretty gnarly trails. When you got off trail, you were on even worse dirt roads. And at the starting line, the race director, which wasn't me, but we were there, and I was standing beside the race director. She delivered her pre-race instructions, and then we were in the 5-minute window before the race started. And Teresa walks up to me, and she says, "Can you help me?" And I was like, "Sure, what do you need?" She said, my tire won't hold air." So then I go into pit crew mode, and I get her tire off, dismounted, start putting the tube in. Mike's trying to help me. All the while, Teresa is pacing back and forth. And then the countdown begins, and I'm still trying to get the tube in the tire. And then the race starts. And so now I'm feeling terrible, but still sitting here Mike and I are rushing to get the tire on, to get everything aired up. What kind of air pressure? It's going to take more than she usually runs. Well, the race started, and I believe Teresa quickened her pace as she paced. 2 minutes after the race start, Teresa starts. And the whole time she's out there, I'm thinking, is the tube going to hold up? What's going to happen? Mike comes up later, and she's like, "It's kind of taking a while, isn't it?" But even then, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, she still came out, starting 2 minutes behind, but still was at the very front of her field when it was all said and done. That's who Teresa was. Whenever an adverse circumstance happened, and the pictures from that race are still some of my favorite, because it was a difficult race and it didn't start how she wanted it to start, but there was still joy on her face as she was completing the ride, because that's who Teresa was. Before we head back to Tammy finishing up some of her readings, is there anyone else who would like to come?
I'm Virginia Kring. I'm in the heart of Georgia, home educators with Teresa when I first moved here. And we've heard a lot about Teresa being a champion and really just always going after everything. Every goal she set, she'd meet it and then some. But I wanted to tell you another part of Teresa that I saw. Teresa, to me, was a true Southern mama. I mean, everywhere you went, if Teresa was there, she was serving. She had a servant's heart. If you were in her home, she made sure you had everything that you could need and then some. If she was at an event, you would find Teresa somewhere serving someone in some way, whether it was through encouragement, a hug, a smile, or fixing food, or just making sure. And every homeschool event that we had, she was the one that would come up with creative ideas and then would just pass the baton and say, "Here, I've given you this idea, now let me hold your hand and help you through that." And she was an inspiration to me as a young mom who was coming into a new place with new people, and she just made sure that it didn't matter if you were new, it didn't matter if she knew you, she made sure that you were served. And I think that that's the biggest thing I will take from her, is to serve each other.
I want to start by giving my deepest condolences to Teresa's family and friends. For those who don't know, I'm Tom's daughter. I was on the mountain bike team the first year that it was founded, and since then I have helped out with the team. I raced for a couple of years, and throughout my time on the team, Teresa was just a pleasure to know. She was always so helpful and so kind to all of us. She's one of the kindest people I've ever met and has one of the most giving, kind hearts. I can remember the first time that she came out on a bike to ride with us to help coach. And I remember she came out dressed in baggy cycling clothes, and she had a pack on her bike, and she was so happy to be there and coach and be helpful, and it was an amazing experience to watch her grow into the amazing athlete that she became, and what a strong cyclist she was. I remember countless times being out with my dad at Bartram just riding for fun, and we'd run into her on the trail and she'd come flying past us, and I'd always think to myself, gosh, she is so fast. I can remember when she sat in the car and read, and now she's out here racing and finishing at the top of her class, and I was just amazed. And the last conversation I had with her was out at Bartram. Me and my dad were out. It was blisteringly hot. And she had just come in from a lap and was stopped at her car, and we spoke. She asked me how school had been going, and I remember she was dripping with sweat. I cannot exaggerate how hot it was outside, and she was going back out for another lap, and I told her, it's good to see you, and have fun out here, don't let the heat get you, and she just smiled at me and rode off, and it sticks with me how no matter the conditions outside, she put her all into what she loved, and she was always happy to be out there, and always just a pleasure to speak to, and I'm going to miss her a lot. To everyone who's had the pleasure of knowing her and myself, I'm so thankful that I got that chance, and my sympathy is with everyone here today. Thank you.
As Jim was saying earlier, Teresa, you could make some serious mistakes by underestimating her when she rode. When I first met her, I was like, who is this tiny little woman? And, how is she going to keep up with us? No. It was, how am I, as a big guy, going to try to keep up with her? So I've been involved in cycling since I was about 13 years old in one form or another. I've raced a lot, and I've been a bicycle frame builder for over 30 years. Part of my job and what I do is I study people on their bicycles. I look at them, I see how they fit on their bikes, I see, if there's any improvements that I can maybe make in their position that would make them faster. And I've seen virtually thousands and thousands and thousands of cyclists. But upon looking at Teresa on her bike, it was just an extension of her. I have very rarely seen anybody that just looked good on their bike. It was a natural thing for her. And from what I'm understanding, what everybody's been saying, apparently life with Teresa was a natural thing. She was good at everything. And that's just an amazing thing. And I'm glad that, I got to be a part of her life for, the last couple of years. So one little quick anecdote. After she thrashed us one afternoon on a group ride, we all came back to the shop, and I just kind of casually looked at her and pointed and said, "Your new nickname is Turbo," because she was that fast, little tiny thing, but just super fast. So thank you.
I knew Teresa through the homeschool group, but also through Scouts. I didn't get to do as much with her as everybody else did because of illness, but I know that she was always there to encourage me, always there with a smile, and she loved you guys so much. My oldest was just a little bit older than that, and my youngest is the same age as Adam. And no one wanted to go to the music when that was my field trip, but Nat did, and so Teresa made sure that Nat was there. Derek always tried to get you to come because he had to go because it was my trip. But because we used to have to take turns doing trips, and that was the one that I got. I would hear from my husband, we're at Scouts, there's Teresa with Adam. I can't wait for the day until you can be there too. And then Adam and Derek were interested in blacksmithing. And there was a trip, and they were going to make sure the blacksmith was there. And he was, but we had such a diverse age group that they weren't actually able to do the blacksmithing, which was the whole sale for them to be on the trip. And so she ran down and found out that he could join the blacksmithing group even though he was young. And I know my son got to experience that at their house. When she started painting, come on and see, it's not a problem. Drop off the science book here. My teacher won't care if you walk in the middle of my class. And as others had said, it's like, what does she need a class for? She was just so good. And when you saw her, she was always encouraging. Because she was like, oh, Derek can join the bike. I was like, well, we're so far away, and I can't do what you do. She's like, I'd ride with him. You don't need to ride with him. You could just bring him. She was always encouraging, always loving. And I know that she stuck behind you guys. And I'm so sorry for your loss. We all miss her.
So I'm Sean Roberts. I'm one of the owners of Twin Lakes Physical Therapy. We had the honor of having Teresa work for us for about 3 years. I first met Teresa as a patient. Teresa was always just like really quiet, and as you got to spend time with her, you learned a little bit about her. She was not one to just come out and just brag about what she could do and her many talents that we've all heard tonight. And so as I was beginning treating her, I had no idea that she was actually a physical therapist. And so she kind of kept that from me. And and so, after that, we worked with each other for a while, and we were in need of help. And of course, Chris and I kept twisting her arm trying to get her to work for us. And eventually we broke her down, and she agreed to work about 2 days a week. Teresa was one of those that she was always, as we've heard tonight, is just very giving of her time. And although she only worked 2 days a week with us, she was really good about if somebody was on vacation or if I needed, I would make those phone calls and just beg her to work an extra day. And she was always really good about doing that. Then as I spent more time with her, I learned more about her, playing the piano and being an artist that she was. But then we got to talking about riding bikes, and I heard that she rode bikes, but I had no idea that I'm not a cyclist. I love doing things that are active. And she said, well, I ride bikes. And so she was just kind of laid it out like that. I never knew that she was as good as she was. And so my son was interested in doing some mountain biking, and so she agreed, one weekend to say, hey, why don't you come out and ride with us? And I said, well, Teresa, I don't have any bikes. She said, no problem. I'll make sure we'll have a whole thing of bikes for you. And so she went and she took me to a place out by Central State, and we loaded it all up. I think Tom A. actually was there that day. But anyway, so we go out, and I'm messing with Teresa, and I still don't understand who Teresa is as a cyclist. I mean, I'm just thinking, she rides bikes, I ride bikes. I'm pretty competitive, always have been. And so I messed with her, and I said, well, Teresa, you ready for this? And she's like, Sean, I've already done 30 miles today. And I'm like, well, great. So, I think we did 12 that day, and, I'm like, I can't even sit on the seat because, but and there was a little bit of a smile at the end of the day that she was looking at me and just really, was enjoying the moment that she had kind of driven me into the ground. So, but Teresa's great, and she is part of the Twin Lakes family, and we will miss her dearly.
I'm the pre-Milledgeville Teresa connection. I worked with Teresa in Warm Springs, Georgia, and she was a colleague, and I actually ended up being her boss, but I never felt like anybody's boss. But anyway, we worked at the Roosevelt Warm Springs Institute for Rehabilitation. We also lived there. We were neighbors and co-workers, and that was one of Warm Springs' recruiting strategies. They would let us live on campus so that we would come work there because who wanted to go work there? But anyway, so we were neighbors and friends and coworkers, and our address was the Roosevelt Warm Springs Institute for Rehab. Now, if you lived in Warm Springs, you understood that, but if you lived outside of Warm Springs and you told him by your address, you lived at the Institute, but that was the inside joke. But Teresa was a phenomenal physical therapist. And so way before she came and impacted all of your lives, she was impacting those folks there who had had strokes and spinal cord injuries and brain injuries. And she was a super talented therapist. Teresa learned a really hard lesson when we were in Warm Springs when she lost her husband, Thor. And that was hard for all of us, and that was sudden, and we didn't expect that. We were all really young and experienced that loss like we feel today. But in true Teresa style, she persevered, and she found her joy again, and she found Mike. And then she had her beautiful family, and she was so proud of you guys. And even though we didn't connect in person, she was always a friend. And always felt like, even though we didn't see each other, that we were connected in that way. So Teresa was a phenomenal friend, and she was a phenomenal therapist, and she was a phenomenal coworker, right, John? And she was a team member. But she also knew the value of life and living life to its fullest every single day. So I think she would encourage us to continue to do that and to love on our families every single day as she did, and to be joyful. Thanks.
My name is Chris Alford. I'm also a physical therapist at Twin Lakes Physical Therapy. I've known Teresa and Mike for many years, and while Sean did not know she was a physical therapist, I did. And so he was working with her, and so between the times that he was working with her, I was behind the scenes for many years. Every time I would see Teresa in the community and in our clinic, I would go over and say, hey, Teresa, when are you going to come join the Twin Lakes team? When are you going to join the Twin Lakes team? And her answer always was, and she'd laugh and no, I'm too busy. I didn't know at the time that she was committed to homeschooling her children, and that's what she was doing with a lot of her time and doing it well, and then ending up at Georgia Tech, obviously, and seeing that in perspective, I get why she was denying us at that point. So one day I walked up to her, ironically, she was on a stationary bike, which is kind of funny. I walked up to her and said, hey, Teresa, when are you going to come join our team? And she goes, I'll let you know when I'm ready. And I said, no, there's a chance. So you're saying there's a chance. And so then I kept prodding her, and then finally one day she changed her tune and said, I'm I think I'm getting close to being ready. And so we started making plans for her to join the Twin Lakes family. And she was such a joy to have. We like Sean said, we twisted her arm all the time to get more than 2 days out of her. But on Mondays, on Mondays she would come in and tell us all about her race on the weekends. And then eventually she started texting me, her on the podium, finishing, first, second, or third in these races. And one of them, she sent a photo to me. I'm looking at the photo, and I'm like, this is 99.9 miles in the mountains. And I'd ask her, I'm like, Teresa, good gracious. So, and my joke with her always was, I said, Teresa, that's incredible. I said, I wouldn't ride behind you on a four-wheeler for 99 miles, much less be on a bike. And she'd laugh and go about her way. But she was obviously accomplished in so many different things with her art and her children and homeschooling and physical therapy as well. And so we will miss her tremendously. Her patients will miss her tremendously. And it's a big loss to our team and obviously this community and more importantly to her family. But we loved her to death and think the world of Teresa.
Still smiling. My name's James. I was one of the poor guys that was on that first ride that Jim mentioned with Teresa, and I think maybe Steve was with me. When we finished that ride, I remember Teresa saying, you guys were pretty good. And at the time, I thought, she did okay for a small woman. She was able to keep up with her strong guys. I realize now, as I've got to know more about Teresa over the last couple of years, that it was just part of her humility, that she didn't want to make this about herself. She probably could have gone out and made us look bad. The second thing was her kindness. She, again, was giving us a genuine compliment. You guys did okay. One of the things with the cycling community, I think we're pretty close. And as Jim mentioned, we like to compete. So when you're on a particular course, maybe there are sections of the course that someone's got the king or queen of the mountain. But one of the things that was unique with Teresa is members of the cycling would often want to lead Teresa out so that she could become queen of the mountain. So we were competing and putting our efforts on the line to help her succeed. And there's not too many people that you really want to go out of your way to really help. Teresa certainly had that about her. I only knew her for a couple of years. I certainly wasn't, I wouldn't dare say I was a close friend of Teresa, but I'm so glad that for a couple of years I got to enjoy riding with her. I think the whole community would say the same. The Lord can bring great joy out of sadness and light out of darkness. This has been a great way for me to get a fuller picture of your mother, your wife. It is going to bring our community closer together. The cycling are thinking about Teresa. We're going to be safer, more considerate cyclists as a result of Teresa's tragic loss. There's goodness that comes out of that loss, and I want you guys to know that the impact is going to last for a long while. Thank you.
This is from one of our fellow Chainbuster cycling teammates, Tracy Schaefer. Standing in the parking lot at Bartram Forest is where I first met Teresa. I liked her immediately. It was at a NICA practice with our boys riding for Old Capitol. Off she went riding while I stayed behind. How boring. We had so much in common. Our conversations often included swapping stories about our children, bikes, and cooking. She continued to encourage me to go out and ride the trails. I think she was determined to get me riding, and when Teresa set her mind to something, she normally succeeded. Finally, I gathered enough courage and off I went. I figured if she could do it, then so could I. Over the years, I would always ride with a piece of Teresa. Little did she know how much she was pushing me. Try new trails, pedal faster, push my limits, dig deep, have grit, and most of all, do not ever quit.
Sean, it doesn't surprise me that Teresa soft pedaled the cycling thing. She kind of rode a bike, like she kind of was a homeschool mom, like she kind of was an artist. Teresa wasn't big on selling herself. She was big on building others up. In the past few weeks, one of the common themes that we have heard is how encouraging Teresa always was. Specifically to our beginner racers and specifically to other women. Countless stories that we have heard of encounters during a race where Teresa didn't know every racer on the course, but almost every racer knew Teresa because they knew how accomplished she was and they knew how calm she was. And so when they would hear Teresa coming and glance and see it was Teresa, there was several times where riders would just try to push past their limits so they wouldn't hold her up. And the refrain from all of them was always the same, where Teresa would say, "Slow down, calm down, you're doing great, you're not holding me up." Because that was Teresa. Not only did she want to do well, and she wanted to do well, but she also wanted you to do well. One of my favorite memories came from a race last year. Teresa and my wife Dawn talked frequently via text and via phone, and I didn't really know what was going on, but during the time frame was when we were waiting on Adam's acceptance letter to Tech. But she was staring at her phone during a race. I don't remember which race. But the email came in, and she comes running up to me, and she goes, he got in. And I had no idea what was going on. Did Mike lock the keys in the car? What are we getting into here? But she was excited, and so Dawn looked over at me, and she goes, Adam got into Tech. Because she knew the whole story, and I just knew a part of it. It's kind of the way it was with Teresa. She held things close to the vest unless she thought it would benefit you. And then she would pour herself into that.
This is from a friend, Diana Dice. I first met Teresa just over 3 years ago when I heard about the old Capital MTB racing team. We had just moved to America under extremely difficult circumstances, and I was looking for something that my kids could be involved in to keep their minds and bodies occupied as we worked our way through our own trauma and loss. When I showed up in the parking lot of Bartram and was busy signing release forms for the kids, she introduced herself and said with a smile, "You know, we need moms out there too. I'd really love another woman to ride with." Then she let me use her son's bike for the night, and on that first ride down to the pavilion, I was hooked. It wasn't too long before I was out at Bartram more than my kids. Mountain biking became a source of healing for me as I pedaled my grief out mile after mile. I'm not sure my mental health would have endured that year if it had not been for biking, and that was a gift from God that I always credited Teresa for. In addition, through biking, I got to know Teresa as a friend, as well as the other women in our tribe. These friendships meant a lot to me. When I would sometimes ride with Teresa, she listened to my frustrations with life, my struggles as a single mom to 9 kids, and my crazy hopes for the future. I remember biking through Bud's Loop and her asking me what my plans were for the future. And when I told her I wanted to be married again one day, She didn't laugh at the far-fetched, crazy hope that I had that someone would marry me at my age with so many kids. And she came to my wedding a year later. Of course, a lot of my riding time with Teresa, I would say most, was me listening to her because she was going at her leisurely pace while chatting, and I was basically dying trying to keep up. What I loved about listening to her was that she would randomly teach me better biking skills, not as an instructor looking down on me, but simply because she was telling me all the things she was excited about learning. I also loved that never once did I hear her speak negatively about another person. She was always so positive, and that made her a joy to be around. One time she crashed during the kids' practice and broke her hand. I came upon her walking her bike out, so I stopped and walked with her. Both that night and over the next few weeks as she healed, I was impressed with her patience in dealing with her injury. She was disappointed and obviously wanted to be on the trails, but she accepted the trainer for the time needed to recover and made the most of it, continuing to get stronger and faster. I'm thankful that I knew Teresa. It is an honor to have been called a friend of hers. My hope is that I will be a friend to others like she was to me. But right now I grieve again at the loss that we've experienced. There's an old church document written over 400 years ago called the Heidelberg Catechism. It begins, "Christian, what is your only comfort in life and death? Answer, that I am not my own, but belong both body and soul, in life and in death, to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. I have learned through loss and grief that my Savior, who was broken on the cross for my sin, is also the healer of my broken heart. Teresa's death has caused me to look to him again for comfort and salvation. My prayer is that all of us will look to Christ in our grief for the comfort we long for. Last year, I moved from Georgia to Virginia. Perhaps the thing I miss the most about Georgia is the biking community. We have something very special in Middle Georgia that isn't easily replaceable. Teresa was a large and central part of that and truly embodied the spirit of the biking community. My other hope as I reflect on Teresa's life and memory is that we will continue to draw together as a community, enjoying rides together, marking miles, racing for the Strava bling, supporting each other, learning from each other, and cheering each other on. That is, I think, what Teresa would want, and I can picture her smiling at that thought. So ride on, my friends, ride for the rose.
Well, there's no doubt we'll never forget this day. You shared such precious memories of your friend. It certainly, we won't forget this. But I want to ask a question that may be more significant. Not will you remember this day, but I'm wondering how you will remember this day. That's probably a more important question to think about. There's a passage in the Old Testament that gives us some help about how we remember days like this. There was a man named Job who got some really bad news. He was wealthy. His children had homes of their own, and all his children were in one house, and they all died because of a tornado that hit the house. Job's response when he heard those words were, "The Lord is given." When I think about my dear friend Teresa, the Lord gave us a real blessing in her, didn't he? Wherever you were in her life, whenever she came to touch your life, you were touched. She was special. 56 years, 2 months, and 3 days ago, Barbara, you told Don, it's time. It was a Saturday. Y'all went to the hospital, and you had a baby girl. And that girl has blessed us. I know she's blessed y'all. She, as we've heard, student at Palmetto, state track records. Graduation, she was best all around, not surprising. Went to college on a scholarship. decided she wanted to be a physical therapist, which is a pretty demanding course of study. We got several PTs here, they can second that. So she kind of eased off on that and studied hard. She graduated. Fortunately, she met a guy named Thor. He chased her till she said yes. She got Thor, and she got a dog named Sam. Went with him everywhere. Then she came to Warm Springs, to the Institute, as Robbie said, where she settled in and became an institution, if you will. Then on a sad Saturday morning, January the 1st, she called the house and said, I think he's dead. Thor and Teresa had become an integral part of our church. She was our pianist. She was a close friend. We all rushed to the house, and sure enough, he was gone. But Teresa was resilient. She kept on doing what she had to do. A little while passed, and this Yankee, who was studying at Auburn, 2 strikes against him in Georgia, you know. He comes to Warm Springs. There was nothing wrong with Mike's vision. There was also nothing wrong with his ability as a psychologist to judge people's character. He saw in her something really special. And she made you chase her. We all watched protectively over her, but Teresa's going to do what Teresa wanted to do. She was smart. So on your wedding day, I remember that so clearly, Mike. She was a radiant, beautiful bride, so happy. There were some pictures. I didn't get to see all the pictures. There were some in the slideshow of her on her wedding day. Mike was grinning like the luckiest man in the world, which he was on that day. They were married. Went to Florida for a short time with a postdoc, came here, bought a house on the lake, and Mike and Teresa made it a home. And then they added their 2 wonderful kids. And they settled here and invested themselves into this community, as you've heard today. When the kids were of age, she started the Rose Preparatory Institute. And she was probably a pretty sufficient taskmaster, I imagine. I remember when y'all took them on that Great Western tour and Don drove, and they got a lot of hands-on learning experience while they were doing that. She was the scout mom. She was the painter. I would see the pictures of her paintings, and I would think, really? That's got to be a picture somebody took. Is it real? My goodness, that woman was talented. And she could write. Don't you love reading her Facebook post? She would talk about the race she'd been on, or she'd talk about the painting she made. Oh, it was tremendous. The Chainbuster Racing, Team Mom, mountain bike, Ride for the Rose, that's great. The last time I was with Mike and Teresa, she'd been to a race in Meriwether. And so we had supper together, heard about how wonderful her children were, how successful they were, how they were achieving so much. We lived through old times and good times and new times and hard times. And when Barbara texted me about the tragic death, I couldn't sleep for 7 days. It was hard. But I look at Teresa's life and I see that the themes that you've mentioned today. She was talented and humble, a very unusual pairing. You just didn't know how deep the water ran with her until she would decide to tell you. She was a remarkable lady and a remarkable woman. She had a servant heart. She loved you, she knew you, she just found ways to bless you, to encourage you. And then she was resilient. I lived with her through some of the hardest days of her life and through some of the warmest and happiest days of her life. She truly was a blessing, and God gave us something wonderful when He gave us Teresa. Thanks be to God that we had her for the time that we had her. Then Job says something that's hard to understand. He said, and the Lord took away. When she was riding down the road, this is my belief, as she was riding down the road, she encountered the greatest physical, spiritual, and dare say emotional crisis in her life as she died. I think that when her body quit working, God was there. You want to know where God was? He was right there with her. He walked with her through the valley of the shadow of death. How many times have we said that psalm? It became real for her. The promise Jesus made that today you'll be with me in paradise was fulfilled in her life on that dark day. I've cried, you've cried. I've tried to sort this out, and there's no making sense of it. It's a tragic accident that happened. We live in a fallen world where bad things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. This is an imperfect world. This is a world where you need God to get through it. Then Job said, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." The Hebrew there is a formula for worship. Job knew in the midst of his terrible loss what he needed more than anything else was God. My advice to you is the advice I learned from Teresa. Stay close to God. When we were planning Thor's funeral, we sat down to talk, and she had some definite ideas. At the end of the service, as the casket was wheeled out, we sang a song. We still do it sometimes. Be strong in the Lord and be of good courage. Your mighty commander will vanquish the foe. Fear not the battle, for the victory is always his. He will protect you wherever you go. Be strong, be strong, be strong in the Lord. And be of good courage, for he is your guide. Be strong, be strong, be strong in the Lord, and rejoice, for the victory is yours. She lived that out in her life. God wants to help us as we work through this. So stay close to God. He understands the pain that you're feeling, that I'm feeling. He's there to walk with us through our own dark valleys. She was such a blessing. Such a great blessing. I'm so thankful that I knew her. I got to marry her and Mike. And I got to see those two wonderful kids. You know, you looked at her mama and you looked at Teresa, you knew who was who. Same thing is true over here, I think, Natalie. I think we ought to pray. Could we bow our heads? Father, these are hard times. It's really hard for us, Lord. We've lost somebody that we love, and the pain is still strong. So, Father, I ask you to help us to be like Job, to remember our dear friend, beloved Teresa, to give thanks for her life and what it meant to us. And, Lord, help us to also be thankful that you took care of her at the time of her greatest crisis, and that we believe she's at rest and at peace with you. And Father, then help us to draw close to you, to not let this tragedy drive a wedge between us and you. And Father, help us to embrace your presence and your love. And then help us, Father, to embrace each other, to encourage us. We ask this in the name of the one who said he was the resurrection and the life, Jesus the Christ. Amen. One of the many things about Teresa was she loved ice cream. We used to joke the night before my daughter was born, Teresa brought some mint chocolate chip ice cream over. And we said that's what caused the month early premature delivery, was that good ice cream that Teresa brought. It seems only fitting that there's ice cream in the fellowship hall. It's only fitting and healthy that we tell some more stories around some ice cream. We maybe cry on each other's shoulders and give thanks for the gift, not only of Teresa, but the promise of God's grace to walk with us. Mike and family are going to lead us there. They'll be there to greet you between eating some ice cream as we celebrate her life and share our grief together. Thank you. Brother, you want to come get the family?